Keep people from their history, and they are easily controlled. My object in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. Accumulation of wealth at one pole is at the same time accumulation of misery, agony of toil, slavery, ignorance, brutality, mental degradation. At the opposite pole, surround yourself with people who make you happy. People who make you laugh, who help you when you're in need. People who genuinely care. They are the ones worth keeping in your life. Everyone else is just passing through. The education of all children, from the moment that they can get along without a mother's care, shall be in state institutions. Communism begins where atheism begins. The theory of communism may be summed up in one sentence: abolish all private property. Catch a man a fish, and you can sell it to him. Teach a man to fish, and you ruin a wonderful business opportunity. When the sufferers learn to think, then the thinkers will learn to suffer. We have no compassion, and we ask no compassion from you. When our turn comes, we shall not make excuses for the terror. The last capitalist we hang shall be the one who sold us the rope. The meaning of peace is the absence of opposition to socialism. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. The first requisite for the happiness of the people is the abolition of religion. Democracy is the road to socialism. A heavy or progressive or graduated income tax is necessary for the proper development of communism. There are, besides, eternal truths, such as freedom, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths, it abolishes all religion and all morality. Instead of constituting them on a new basis, it therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience. There must be something rotten in the very core of a social system which increases its wealth without diminishing its misery. The full man does not understand the wants of the hungry. Anyone who knows anything of history knows that great social changes are impossible without feminine upheaval. Social progress can be measured exactly by the social position of the fair sex, the ugly ones included. The existence of the state is inseparable from the existence of slavery. The Jews of Poland are the smeariest of all races. Owners of capital will stimulate working class to buy more and more of expensive goods, houses, and technology, pushing them to take more and more expensive credits, until their debt becomes unbearable. The unpaid debt will lead to bankruptcy of banks, which will have to be nationalized, and state will have to take the road, which will eventually lead to communism. There is no greater stupidity than for people to marry and so surrender themselves to the small miseries of domestic and private life. The democratic concept of man is false because it is Christian. The democratic concept holds that each man is a sovereign being. This is the illusion, dream, and postulate of Christianity. Religion is the opium of the masses. We know that violent measures against religion are nonsense. But this is an opinion. As socialism grows, religion will disappear. Its disappearance must be done by social development, in which education must play a part. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules above. Money plays the largest part in determining the course of history. For the bureaucrat, the world is a mere object to be manipulated by him. Social reforms are never carried out by the weakness of the strong, but always by the strength of the weak. The rich will do anything for the poor but get off their backs. All history is nothing but a continuous transformation of human nature. Change the economic base and you will change human beings. The production of too many useful things results in too many useless people. The communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Do not be deluded by the abstract word freedom. Whose freedom? Not the freedom of one individual in relation to another, but freedom of capital to crush the worker. The unity of the bourgeoisie can be shaken only by the unity of the proletariat. Taxes are the source of life for the bureaucracy, the army, and the court, in short, for the whole apparatus of the executive power. Strong government and heavy taxes are identical. This young lady, who instantly overwhelmed me with her kindness, is the ugliest creature I have seen in my entire life, with repulsive Jewish facial features. Religion is the impotence of the human mind to deal with occurrences it cannot understand. Is it a misfortune that magnificent California was seized from the lazy Mexicans who did not know what to do with it? Let us consider the actual, worldly Jew, not the Sabbath Jew, as Bauer does, but the everyday Jew. What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. What is his worldly god? Money. Money is the jealous god of Israel, in face of which no other god may exist. Money degrades all the gods of man and turns them into commodities. The bill of exchange is the real god of the Jew. His god is only an illusory bill of exchange. The chimerical nationality of the Jew is the nationality of the merchant, of the man of money in general. I do not like money. Money is the reason we fight. Be careful to trust a person who does not like wine. The unity is brought about by force. The less you eat, drink, and read books, the less you go to the theater, the dance hall, the public house, the less you think, love, theorize, sing, paint, fence, etc., the more you save, the greater becomes your treasure, which neither moths nor dust will devour your capital. The less you are, the more you have, the less you express your own life, the greater is your alienated life, the greater is the store of your estranged being. To destroy Christianity, we must first destroy the British Empire. The only antidote to mental suffering is physical pain. The social principles of Christianity preach cowardice, self-contempt, abasement, submission, humility. In a word, all the qualities of the canal. The state is the executive committee of the ruling class. Social progress can be measured exactly by the social position of the fair sex. Men make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly encountered, given, and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all the dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brain of the living. To be radical is to grasp things by the root. Money is the alienated essence of man's work and existence. This essence dominates him and he worships it. The class struggle necessarily leads to the dictatorship of the proletariat. If anything is certain, it is that I myself am not a Marxist. Landlords, like all other men, love to reap where they never sowed. Every provisional political setup following a revolution requires a dictatorship, and an energetic dictatorship at that. Society does not consist of individuals, but expresses the sum of interrelations, the relations within which these individuals stand. When the train of history hits a curve, the intellectuals fall off. May the devil take these people's movements, especially when they are peaceful. Last words are for those fools who believe they have not yet said enough. Misery motivates, not utopia. Man makes religion. Religion does not make man. Private property has made us so stupid and partial that an object is only ours when we have it, when it exists for us as capital. Thus all the physical and intellectual senses have been replaced by the sense of having. Without the presence of class warfare, trade unions would be hard put to justify their existence. In communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, shepherd, or critic. You will have to go through 15, 20, 50 years of civil wars and national struggles not only to bring about a change in society but also to change yourselves and prepare yourselves for the exercise of political power. Reason has always existed, but not always in a reasonable form. The history of all previous societies has been the history of class struggles. I am nothing, but I must be everything. It is not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but, on the contrary, their social being that determines their consciousness. Revolutions are the locomotives of history. Money degrades all the gods of man and converts them into commodities. In bourgeois society, capital is independent and has individuality, while the living person is dependent and has no individuality. In the eyes of dialectical philosophy, nothing is established for all times, nothing is absolute or sacred. The method of production of the material things of life generally determines the social, political, and spiritual currents of life. Nothing can have value without being an object of utility. Luxury is the opposite of the naturally necessary. The national debt has given rise to joint stock companies, to dealings and negotiable effects of all kinds, and to adjutage, and a word to stock exchange gambling and the modern bankocracy. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. The more of himself man attributes to God, the less he has left in himself. In this sense, the theory of the communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property. Manifesto of the Communist Party. The policy of Russia is changeless. Its methods, its tactics, its maneuvers may change, but the polar star of its policy, world domination, is a fixed star. About Russia, capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. The working class is revolutionary, or it is nothing. So in Jewry we recognize a contemporary universal antisocial phenomenon, which has reached its present pitch through a process of historical development in which the Jews have zealously cooperated. And this evil antisocial aspect of Jewry has grown to a stage at which it must necessarily collapse. Philosophy stands in the same relation to the study of the actual world as masturbation to sexual love. The very cannibalism of the counter-revolution will convince the nations that there is only one way in which the murderous death agonies of the old society and the bloody birth throes of the new society can be shortened, simplified, and concentrated, and that way is revolutionary terror. Even an entire society, a nation, or all simultaneously existing societies taken together, are not owners of the earth. They are simply its possessors, its beneficiaries, and have to bequeath it in an improved state to succeeding generations. The French Revolution gave rise to ideas which led beyond the ideas of the entire old world order. The revolutionary movement, which began in 1789, gave rise to the communist idea which Babeuf's friend Buonarroti reintroduced in France after the Revolution of 1830. This idea, consistently developed, is the idea of the New World Order. All I know is that I am not a Marxist. Nothing is more tedious than the dreaming platitude. Scientific truth is always paradox, if judged by everyday experience, which catches only the delusive appearance of things. They don't know it, but they are doing it. Private property has made us so stupid and one-sided that an object is only ours when we have it. Between capitalist and communist society there lies the period of the revolutionary transformation of the one into the other. Corresponding to this is also a political transition period in which the state can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Each pursues his private interest and only his private interest, and thereby serves the private interests of all, the general interest, without willing it or knowing it. The real point is not that each individual's pursuit of his private interest promotes the totality of private interests, the general interest. One could just as well deduce from this abstract phrase that each individual reciprocally blocks the assertion of the other's interests, so that, instead of a general affirmation, this war of all against all produces a general negation. The past lies like a nightmare upon the present. In my free time I do differential and integral calculus. Labor in the white skin can never free itself as long as labor in the black skin is branded. Only in community with others has each individual the means of cultivating his gifts in all directions. Only in the community, therefore, is personal freedom possible. The wealthy man is the man who has much, not the one who has much. Communism is the genuine resolution of the antagonism between man and nature and between man and man. It is the true resolution of the conflict between existence and essence, objectification and self-affirmation, freedom and necessity, individual and species. It is the riddle of history solved and knows itself as the solution. The alienation of man thus appeared as the fundamental evil of capitalist society. The first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of ruling class, to win the battle for democracy. Force is the midwife of every old society pregnant with a new one. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite. Capitalist production, therefore, develops technology and the combining together of various processes into a social whole, only by sapping the original sources of all wealth, the soil and the laborer. Men make their own history. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is the demand for their real happiness. To call on them to give up their illusions about their condition is to call on them to give up a condition that requires illusions. The criticism of religion is, therefore, an embryo, the criticism of that veil of tears of which religion is the halo. Under private property, each tries to establish over the other an alien power, so as thereby to find satisfaction of his own selfish need. The increase in the quantity of objects is therefore accompanied by an extension of the realm of the alien powers to which man is subjected, and every new product represents a new potentiality of mutual swindling and mutual plundering. You are horrified at our intending to do away with private property. But in your existing society, private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hands of those 9/10. You reproach us, therefore, with intending to do away with a form of property, the necessary condition for whose existence is the non-existence of any property for the immense majority of society. Christ represents originally, 1. Men before God, 2. God for men, 3. Men to man. Similarly, money represents originally, in accordance with the idea of money, 1. Private property for private property, 2. Society for private property, 3. Private property for society. But Christ is alienated God and alienated man. God has value only insofar as he represents Christ, and man has value only insofar as he represents Christ. It is the same with money. With disdain I will throw my gauntlet full in the fact of the world and see the collapse of this pygmy giant. Then will I wander godlike and victorious through the ruins of the world. And giving my words an active force, I will feel equal to the Creator. The more a ruling class is able to assimilate the most prominent men of a ruled class, the more solid and dangerous its rule. The communists have no need to introduce free love. It has existed almost from time immemorial. We should not say that one man's hour is worth another man's hour, but rather that one man during an hour is worth just as much as another man during an hour. Time is everything, man is nothing, he is at the most time's carcass. The whole proletariat must be armed at once with muskets, rifles, cannon and ammunition, and the revival of the old-style citizens' militia, directed against the workers, must be opposed. Necessity is blind until it becomes conscious. Freedom is the consciousness of necessity. If this laborer were in possession of his own means of production, and was satisfied to live as a laborer, he need not work beyond the time necessary for the reproduction of his means of subsistence, say 8 hours a day. A nation that enslaves another forges its own chains. Communism deprives no man of the ability to appropriate the fruits of his labor. The only thing it deprives him of is the ability to enslave others by means of such appropriations. Russia is a name usurped by the Muscovites. They are not Slavs, they do not belong to the Indo-Germanic race at all, they are de-interests, who must be chased back across the Dnieper, etc. Hitherto, every form of society has been based on the antagonism of oppressing and oppressed classes. What the bourgeoisie therefore produces, above all, are its own grave diggers. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. Men's ideas are the most direct emanations of their material state. Labor is not the only source of material wealth, i.e., of the use values it produces. As William Petty says, labor is the father of material wealth, the earth is its mother. Wages are determined by the bitter struggle between capitalist and worker. The imaginary flowers of religion adorn man's chains. Man must throw off the flowers, and also the chains. When commercial capital occupies a position of unquestioned ascendancy, it everywhere constitutes a system of plunder. Religious distress is at the same time the expression of the real distress and also the protest against real distress. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of the spiritless condition. It is the opium of the people. Art is always and everywhere the secret confession, and at the same time the immortal movement of its time. And as for the Jews, who since the emancipation of their sect have everywhere put themselves, at least in the person of their eminent representatives, at the head of the counter-revolution, what awaits them? The criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism. It's possible that I shall make an ass of myself. But in that case one can always get out of it with a little dialectic. I have, of course, so worded my proposition as to be right either way. But the more these conscious illusions of the ruling class are shown to be false and the less they satisfy common sense, the more dogmatically they are asserted and the more deceitful, moralizing and spiritual becomes the language of established society. Ideas do not exist separately from language. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism, in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms, it has set up that single, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. Capitalist agricultural production prevents the return to the soil of its elements consumed by man in the form of food and clothing. It therefore violates the conditions necessary to lasting fertility of the soil. By this action it destroys at the same time the health of the town laborer and the intellectual life of the rural laborer. The working men have no country. We cannot take away from them what they have not got in capitalist society. Spare time is acquired for one class by converting the whole lifetime of the masses into labor time. Money is therefore not only the object but also the fountainhead of greed. There is only one effective antidote for mental suffering, and that is physical pain. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Workingmen of all countries, unite. In proportion as the bourgeoisie, i.e., capital, is developed, in the same proportion is the proletariat, the modern working class, developed, a class of laborers who live only so long as they find work, and who find work only so long as their labor increases capital. These laborers, who must sell themselves piecemeal, are a commodity, like every other article of commerce, and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of competition, to all the fluctuations of the market. The capitalist mode of production and accumulation, and therefore capitalist private property, have for their fundamental condition the annihilation of self-earned private property, in other words, the expropriation of the laborer. Men make their own history, but not in circumstances of their own choosing. Hegel remarks somewhere that all great, world historical facts and personages occur, as it were, twice. He has forgotten to add, the first time as tragedy, the second as farce. By means of the banking system, the distribution of capital as a special business, a social function, is taken out of the hands of the private capitalists and usurers. But at the same time, banking and credit become the most effective means of driving capitalist production beyond its own limits and one of the most effective vehicles of crises and swindle. The worker puts his life into the object, but now it no longer belongs to him, it belongs to the object. The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas, i.e., the class which is the ruling material force of society, is at the same time its ruling intellectual force. The weapon of criticism can never replace the criticism of weapons. The monopoly of capital becomes a fetter upon the mode of production, which has sprung up and flourished along with, and under it. Centralization of the means of production and socialization of labor at last reach a point where they become incompatible with their capitalist integument. This integument is burst asunder. The knell of capitalist private property sounds. The expropriators are expropriated. If the laborer consumes his disposable time for himself, he robs the capitalist. What I did that was new was to prove that the existence of classes is only bound up with particular historical phases in the development of production. That the class struggle necessarily leads to the dictatorship of the proletariat, and that dictatorship itself only constitutes the transition to the abolition of all classes and to a classless society. Although gold and silver are not by nature money, money is by nature gold and silver. Music is the mirror of reality. The world will be for the common people, and the sounds of happiness will reach even the deepest springs. What the working man sells is not directly his labor, but his laboring power, the temporary disposal of which he makes over to the capitalist. This is so much the case that I do not know whether by the English law, but certainly by some continental laws, the maximum time is fixed for which a man is allowed to sell his laboring power. If allowed to do so for any indefinite period whatever, slavery would be immediately restored. Such a sale, if it comprised his lifetime, for example, would make him at once the lifelong slave of his employer. In all of human history, no country or no people have suffered such terrible slavery, conquest and foreign oppression, and no country and no people have struggled so strenuously for their emancipation than Sicily and the Sicilians. Life is not determined by consciousness, but consciousness by life. The human being is in the most literal sense a political animal, not merely a gregarious animal, but an animal which can individuate itself only in the midst of society. The country that is more developed industrially only shows, to the less developed, the image of its own future. The most violent, mean and malignant passions of the human breast, the furies of private interest. Society is undergoing a silent revolution, which must be submitted to, and which takes no more notice of the human existences it breaks down than an earthquake regards the houses it subverts. The classes and the races, too weak to master the new conditions of life, must give way. The entire so-called history of the world is nothing but the creation of man through human labor.